Hi, it's Maija here with my wrap-up of my 2020 reading goals, and my video with my 2021 goals will be the video after this one. So let's go through all the reading challenges that I set myself in 2020 and see if I actually completed them. And my first challenge is always a number goal, and I set this at something that I know that I can achieve. So on Goodreads, I set my reading challenge to 66 books, and I read 120 books and comics in 2020, so I completed this one. Then was my Reads and Receipts project, and this is where I track my physical owned TBR or to be read books. And at the start of the year, I had 68 books, and I had hoped to get it under 50 in 2020. That would have meant reading 18 books of my physical TBR that I owned before 2020, and also reading all of the books that I bought in 2020. And I guess if you just look at the numbers, then this was a fail. I got to 63 books on my physical TBR, so that is still lower than I started last year with. I only got my TBR down 5 books, as you can see, although I read 17 books of my TBR in 2020. If we compare that with how I did last year I had read 32 books of my physical TBR, but back then I also counted my unread comics. So I had a lot of comics that I bought and then read throughout the year, so that added to the stats a lot. In 2020, I didn't count my comics, and I only have one unread comic left currently on my shelf, so it wouldn't have made much difference either way. So out of the 17 physical books I read of my TBR in 2020, I read 10 older TBR books and 7 books that I had bought in 2020. So that one was a bit of a surprise for me, because I had thought that I had mainly focused on reading the books that I bought and hadn't read a lot of my TBR veterans off my shelves. But actually the number is larger for the TBR vets. So I read 17 books. I also unhauled 3 books of my TBR, and then I have 8 physical books left of the ones that I bought in 2020. So let's go through the books that I read for my Reads and Receipts project. Usually I would have unhauled more of these, but I haven't been taking my books out to unhaul them in 2020, so I still have them like in a cupboard, so I can show them to you, except for the first one. So the first book that I read of my TBR was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and I gave this one 3 stars, I think, and I had bought that in 2020 and then read it. The second book that I read was Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, which I gave 4 stars. The Blank Wall by Elizabeth Sanksay Holding got 2 stars. The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia A. McKillip, 3.5 stars. In the Forest of Forgetting by Theodora Goss, this is a short story collection, got 3.5 stars. The Tropic of Serpents by Mary Brennan, 4 stars. The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart, 3 stars. The Lie Tree by Frances Hardinge, 1.5 stars. The Humanity of Monsters, edited by Michael Matheson, got 2.5 stars. The True Queen by Zento was again a book that I bought in 2020, and this one got 3 stars. Another purchase from 2020, Piranesi by Susanna Clark, got 4 stars. Yellow Jessamine by Caitlin Starling, also bought in 2020, got 3 stars. The Old Nurse's Story, Elizabeth Gaskell, 3 stars, also bought in 2020. The Angel of the Crows by Catherine Addison, another 2020 release, got 3.5 stars. Magic Bites by Ilona Andrews, 1.5 stars. The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher, 3 stars. This one was also bought in 2020. And finally, In the Forests of Serre by Patricia A. McKillip, 4 stars. So that was my Reads and Receipts project. My next challenge was a separate video that I made, 10 books I want to read in 2020, and this I completely failed. This was mostly a test, because I know if I add books to a list, I don't want to read them once they are on a list, so I kind of knew this, but I still wanted to try it out. Out of that list, I only read 2 books, and those were The Tropic of Serpents by Mary Brennan and European Travel for the Monstrous Gentlewoman by Theodora Goss. I also had Fool's Assassin on that list, which I didn't get to, but I did read 1 book from Robin Hobb's Rainwild Chronicles that I needed to read to get to that one. So I sort of read 3 books off that list. Then was my reread challenge. I set myself 3 series, and I should have reread 1 of them in 2020, and this one I completed. I read or reread The Dragonlance Chronicles by Margaret Boyce and Tracy Hickman. I have the Finnish editions, but I read most of this as an English ebook. I think I did better with this challenge because it had a choice. I didn't need to read all of these things on a list, but I had a few things in mind. The other things were The Musketeers, or the D'Artagnan Romances series by Alexandre Dumas, and the Sandman comic series by Neil Gaiman and various artists. So this challenge I aced. My fourth challenge was to host that readathon. I had an idea for a readathon in my head for a couple of years, and I decided that I wanted to do it in 2020 because in 2019 my top spots for the year's best books that I had read had went to Tanith Lee's book from the 70s and a McKillip book from the 90s. So I wanted to finally host my Women Write Classic SFF readathon, and I did that. So this one is a completed challenge. I hosted a readathon that was all about reading books, fantasy, science fiction, and horror books, or other speculative fiction books written by women before the year 2000. And I had a great time doing that, and I hope to host it again next April. I did it in April last year. Then my sixth and final challenge was to continue reading Hercule Poirot books. I am reading this in order, of course, by Agatha Christie, and this one I sort of completed. I read 3 more Poirot books. I read Appointment with Death, Hercule Poirot's Christmas, and Sad Cypress. So I completed this. I read more Poirot books, but I need to up my game if I actually want to finish that series sometime. So that was how I did with my 2020 reading goals. I completed more than I failed, I'd like to think. And let me know in the comments if you reached any of your reading goals, if you had any. And I will see you in my next video, which will be me setting my 2021 reading goals.